Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. I am your host, Jan Washington. This is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. I would like to extend my gratitude in you listening to this podcast. It means everything to me, and I hope it is clear that this subject matter is so important to me. I care about our people, our future, and making a positive change in this nation. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. And this episode is especially for the Content Creators of Color Challenge. I wanted to share an episode where I had one of our fellow creatives on my show earlier this summer. Darrell Barnes was a guest on my show, and we had a really great conversation and talked about some great topics, Henrietta Lacks, and what was going on with the lawsuit with the family and the experimentation that they did on her. Really interesting story. Google Henrietta Lacks, and just some other great topics were covered. And so I want to share that interview and episode with you with our fellow content creator, Darrell Barnes. Check it out, guys. And welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. Today we have a special guest, Darrell Barnes, audio engineer and host of the All Things Black podcast. Welcome to the show, Darrell.
Hey, thank you for having me. Absolutely. It's a great pleasure to be on your show. I've actually listened to a couple of your episodes and I found them actually to be very informative. And I like the title, by the way, Woke by Accident. That's pretty creative.
Oh,
I'm gonna have to have you on my show to find out exactly why you called it Woke by Accident. But I guess that's later on down the line. Yeah. I am a podcast host of the All Things Black podcast. You can hear it on all the streaming platforms. I am also an audio engineer, like you said. I actually have more than a couple of years up under my belt. I went to school in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was the Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis studio that we trained in. I got a chance to see all the greats that were recorded there. Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, Boyz II Men. Actually, I got a couple of photographs with Boyz II Men. Okay. So there's some great stories there that, they have for all of the national artists that came through and recorded music there. Sounds of Blackness as well. So it was a very, 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 very great experience to have, to have had gone through with that.
That's cool. And so Darrell, aka Mr. Blackovation, has agreed to co-host the show today with me, and we will get his take on some topics, and we will learn more about his podcast, the All Things Black podcast, and his audio training course, which he'll be offering soon. So that sounds really interesting. Obviously, he's an expert in the audio engineering space. So it's something that we all will be able to take advantage of, guys. So be sure to check that out. We'll have the link and all of those details posted. So let's get into some topics. So the first one, there was an update to the Botham Jean case from September of 2018. We may remember Botham Jean, gentleman was in his apartment, and the former officer Amber Geyer entered his apartment thinking she was entering her own apartment and fired and fatally shot him, thinking that he was an intruder, when actually she had entered his apartment and fatally shot him. And so she was sentenced to 10 years at that time. And so the update is that the Texas Appeals Court upheld her murder conviction. And so she was trying to basically get out sooner, and the Texas courts upheld this conviction. So she will continue to serve her 10-year sentence. We all remember this case, and it was just really traumatic case. Your thoughts on remembering that case from 2018?
Yes, I remember watching the news about it and all of the different things that came out about that case. My first thought was, when I saw it, was that To be totally honest, I didn't think anything was going to happen to her at all, to be totally honest, because we've seen this time and again. And most of the time, police officers walk
Right.
because of the power of the police unions and those that back the police unions, right? So I didn't think anything was going to happen to her at all. It was a travesty that this actually happened to such a young man. And the fact that she was allowed to and able to pull a service weapon on a man that was in his own apartment is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. The fact that they even would have to go through the lengths that they did to try to absolve her again was ridiculous. And it's still ridiculous that she would even attempt to make an appeal to get out. She's only serving 10 years, which of course, if she does good time, she'll be out way sooner. She's a police officer, right? She's a police officer. They cover their own. I remember when I was living in Minneapolis, there was a couple of police officers that I was, kind of familiar with. And one had come down from Boston, I think it was. And he would rant and rave all the time about how he felt that the city of Minneapolis did not have a good brotherhood, right? A really good brotherhood. And he was talking about that. And as you can listen to him talk, he was actually talking, to me, it was cold to say, we really need a brotherhood that was really going to cover our behinds no matter what we do. Right. That is the police stance, the blue, what is it? The thin blue line that nobody can
wall or something.
Yeah, the
right?
wall. Yeah, the wall. Yeah. And nobody can penetrate. Which is actually ridiculous. Police need to be held accountable for their actions, regardless of whether or not, they need to be held accountable. And this notion that, they can hide behind the law is ridiculous. And we need to do something about that. And first and foremost, and I'm going to say this live, the police unions need to be held fully accountable. The police unions need to be, I'm not going to say necessarily be defunded, but these are the people that needs to be going after, because these are the persons that are protecting these police officers, and everything that they do. But so in my opinion, the police unions need to be fully held accountable for every action, for every cover up that they have done over the years.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. So, but I mean, definitely glad to see the court uphold the decision. Surprising that, because like you said, we're kind of expecting her to get out sooner, and she may still. So we'll see how that case develops. And then the next story is from Aurora, Colorado. There's video footage that was circulated on social media where a brutal arrest of a African-American man, Kyle Vinson. The body camera video from the officers showed the arrest, where the officers attempting to arrest 3 men with outstanding warrants. When the 2 fled the scene, Kyle Vinson was alone, and he would be beaten, fighting for his life later. And so Officer John Halberd can be seen pointing his gun at Vincent, ordering him to lie face down and show his hands, which he did. The officer hit him with his pistol at least 7 times. One of his cuts required 7 stitches. He can be heard saying that he can't breathe. The officer is now facing multiple charges, including second-degree assault, attempted first-degree assault. Another officer on the scene faces misdemeanor charges for failing to intervene or report the use of force. Authorities have yet to say whether Vincent will face charges for the outstanding warrant on the probation violation. But I mean, obviously from the looks of the video, excessive force was used here. Your thoughts on this one?
Again, it's nothing new. I'm a little bit older gentleman, but it's nothing new. When you go back and you read all of the accounts of Black men, specifically Black women included, that have encounters with the police department, some fatally. Again, it's nothing new. And I just every time I see something like that, it just brings back to memory some of the things that I've actually encountered with some police officers. Okay. And a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't brand, police officers with the same brush. We shouldn't generalize all police officers. But I'm going to say this: if you are a police officer and you know of corruption, if you know of anything that is not complying with police procedure and ethics and things like that, and you know of that to be happening in any department, mm-hmm. I'm not going to say that you're a good police officer. I'm sorry, I'm not going to say that, because if you can't out your brothers or sisters who is doing something that they know they shouldn't be doing, then you're just as bad as the one that's actually committing those heinous crimes.
Oh, totally.
So yeah, so I don't see. I'm not going to say I see good police officers or bad police officers. You are in effect ruining the names of the quote unquote good police officers by not outing the bad police officers. That was extreme. I did see the video. The gentleman's head was cracked open, and you can see him bleeding profusely from the forehead. Totally excessive, but some of the things that we have to understand as well is that, I'm gonna say this about us. Some of us believe that we're under the illusion that for some reason that racism is non-existent. It's not existent. We have great relationships with other ethnicities and races of people, and that's fine. But the construct, the infrastructure that founded this country is still here. And you still have people that are of a very racist mindset, and they have infiltrated every institution in this country. So it's not a coincidence that you would have somebody that would just go off half cocked and angry, even though there was no warrant for them to be angry, and just begin to take it out on somebody that they deem lesser than themselves. And now here again, we potentially could have had another George Floyd situation,
right,
where a man died on camera, and now everybody is again up in an uproar, and we're still grieving from the fact that George Floyd died some years ago brutally, and it went out nationally, and internationally, and people saw this. So I'll say this much, and I'll be done. Unfortunately, because a lot of us as Black people have not fully come together, we haven't learned these lessons yet. I would venture to say that more of this is to come, because one of the things that it's doing, there's two things that it's doing. It is uncovering those that have hidden for years behind the veil of racism and white supremacy. And it's also showing us as Black people that we must come together to fend off these kinds of racist attempts and attacks.
You say more?
Unfortunately, I mean, because I mean, I hate to say it, but this is not an isolated incident. There's more that's not being published, right? We just only know about the ones that are being published, but there's more that's going on. They didn't make it to a camera.
Right.
Police departments who are supposed to wear body cams. Well, they know how to turn off the body cam. Well, they know how to take the footage and then edit it and present it to the public like nothing ever happened, to benefit the officers, right? So this is nothing new. This is nothing new. So there's a multitude of those incidents that are occurring across the country that we just not made, haven't been made privy to. We don't know anything about them. So we just get a glimpse into a George Floyd situation, or we get a glimpse into the gentleman's situation in Colorado, right? But there's plenty more going on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like you said, coming together when these situations occur, putting pressure on the departments, the fact that they have filed charges against the officer to hold him accountable is good. Like you said, holding the other officers accountable definitely needs to happen. There was one case in Buffalo, New York, I talked about, and to just show you an example of how deep it can get with the whole intervening. So Carriel Horn, that case, she intervened in a chokehold situation way before the George Floyd, like 15 years. And she was actually punished, lost her job, lost her pension and everything. Buffalo, New York, 15 plus years. And she's just now getting it back now They had her on Breakfast Club and all
Yes,
this stuff a
yes,
couple
yeah,
years
yeah.
ago.
I heard about that.
Yeah, and she actually liked one of my posts where I actually talked about it, which was interesting. I guess maybe the hashtag she saw, but yeah, it took all that time. But I mean, she's been putting pressure and raising this issue all this time to, get. And I think maybe George Floyd and all that may have had some impact. And hey, that was wrong. Okay, and they made a change in it, but it just shows you like she intervened in something that clearly wasn't right, and she actually got in trouble for it. So,
But see, that's the thing, though. I commend her fully for
mhm,
standing up.
yeah,
And she lost quite a bit for doing it. And I think that's the thing. We get to a point where, hey, I've accomplished, being an officer. I went through my training. I got my certificates. I went through college. I got my degree, right?
mm,
So it's a loss of those things that we get to a place where we're afraid of losing by telling the truth. There's
yes,
so many people that know the truth in every department, in every institution, but they're afraid of telling the truth because they understand what the consequences are, or they've actually seen the consequences being carried out on somebody else.
hmm,
So they don't want to do that. But we're in a day and time now where you have to tell the truth. You gotta tell the truth regardless of the circumstances, because there's something else coming down the pipe. That's either going to either force you to tell the truth and stand with truth, or face the consequences of not telling the truth.
yeah. I mean, I feel like it's going to come out in some way, but I mean, there's a great deal of pressure on you. I acknowledge that. I had a former officer on. He was actually from DC, and so like his experience is a little different because he was like everybody was black, all the way from the chief all the way down. But it was pressure that you didn't go against your colleagues, and so
But what makes
you.
that? Let me ask this question: what makes that different than a gang? That's it's
It's
see when I
different
hear
because
that.
they take a oath and a.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So what makes that different than a gang? So we, and a lot of officers and everybody that, not everybody, but a lot of people in public life look at people that are in gangs and they say, oh, these people are terrible. These people are horrible.
Mhm.
But they take an oath, they take a pledge,
Mm,
right? It's a family. They have laws, right? That you can't violate those laws. And if you do violate those laws, there could be some consequences. Okay.
okay.
So, put that on the police department, dress it up, put a badge on it, right? And they, wearing their dress blues and shiny shoes, and they get get a salary and whatnot for doing it. But
Yeah.
I don't see the difference. I don't see the difference.
Yeah. I guess when you look at it that way,
I don't
I
see the
mean,
difference. It's what
well,
because I just okay. So there was another oh man, I forget that somebody sent it to me, but it was a young gentleman, young black guy that I think was involved in a car accident, and he was running, right. So he took off and ran.
mhm,
He ran into an elevator. The elevator didn't go up fast enough, so he actually exited the elevator, and he was trying to go back into the entrance that he came out of, and one of the police officers caught up with him. Okay, so we're inclined sometimes to see police officers that are maybe 3, 4 deep, right? Maybe six deep. We see them
mhm.
like that. Well, in this video, there was about maybe 15 police officers, and every police officer jumped on this boy that did not have a weapon
Oh
or
wow.
anything. There was about 15 police officers, and one and more than two were seen kicking the gentleman on the floor. So again, how is that different than a gang?
Mhm.
In my opinion, you know, that's the questions I raise, and I raise those questions quite a bit, and nobody can really tell me what's the difference, except for the fact that they're supposed to uphold a law, right? But I don't see the difference.
Well, that's a horrible thought because there is supposed to be this honor and the protect and serve, and you would think that if something were to happen, that you could call on the authorities to be there to,
Yes,
you know.
yes, and don't get me wrong, there has been great situations where police have actually literally done their job. Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. But at the same time, when you get these type of um, things that happen and it's shown to the world, it gives a bad name to police officers in general. No different than it would be given a bad name to us in our community when our something happens in our community and it's lambasted all across the news media and it's exported outside the country. People begin to look at us in a different light, right? Negatively. And the same thing with the police officers. When that happens, okay, police officers start to get bad raps. We
Mm.
expect you, like when I had to run in with the police department, I expected them to do their job. I expected them to do that job. I didn't expect them to do anything outside of that. And when that happened, right, when I got jumped on, when that happened to me, I'm like, well, damn. Like I expect you to put me in handcuffs. Not to say that I was doing something that was just totally over the top, but if you want to detain somebody, I expect you to put me in handcuffs, right? I expect you to question me. I expect that. But when you go out of your way to make it known that you can get away with certain things, like I had a gun held in my head.
Oh,
I got hit upside the head with a flashlight. I got punched in the face. I got slammed on top of a car. And then when they ran my record because they thought I was some type of criminal because black men are criminals. When they ran my record, nothing came back. Completely clean.
wow.
And it's like, what was that for? It's like, were you teaching me a lesson? And no apology, nothing like that. And then just sent me on my way. And I'm like, wow. So these things happen on a continuous basis. These things do happen. And not that I have any kind of ill will in my heart for the police department
Mm-hmm.
because of my experience, but at the same time, when it happens, when that type of occurrence happens all too often, that is where the problem lies. It's not an isolated incident. When it becomes continuous, therein that lies a problem.
Definitely. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. That was in Atlanta, or what city was that in?
That was the beautiful state of Kansas City, Kansas.
Was it? Yikes. Mm, yeah, that's pretty rough. Yeah, I mean, hopefully things will get better, but I mean, I think once so much attention is being brought, there is a better job of accountability, I think, because if they don't, they know that people are going to be out front on the lawn of the district attorney's house if it takes that, if they don't get charges. So I think, they're quick to have these press conferences and things like that. But like you said, there's so many cases we don't know about. But the ones that do get the attention, I feel like there's a quicker response to give the public a response. Don't you feel like that lately?
I'm gonna say something. Not that I haven't said anything controversial since I've been on here, but this is really going to be controversial. I'm gonna be totally honest. Um, Black people have protested before, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have demanded our rights before. We've done all of that. I'm going to say this much that, in my humble opinion, I believe. Well, there's a couple of things that I could throw in there, but this is the one that I was really looking to say. I believe that if it had not been for quote unquote allyship, and then sometimes I hate to use that word, but I believe if it wasn't
Okay.
for some type of allyship, that the the attention to pardon me, kind of went out, but the attention to what happened to George Floyd probably wouldn't have gotten as much as attention if it wasn't for the allyship. Because we're expected to protest, we're expected to burn down stuff, quote unquote, the looting and all of that, right?
Okay.
But when we got the allyships in terms of other ethnicities or races becoming more involved in the situation, I think that's kind of what woke them up. And I think that's kind of what's happening right now. It's not per se black people of ourselves. We need to come together. We need to do exactly what we're supposed to be doing. But when you start getting, and I'm gonna be very specific, but when you start getting white people upset about what they see occurring, because remember, they're also under the illusion that the police department is the best thing since sliced bread, right? They're under that illusion too. So when they saw that George Floyd incident, then they were like, well, damn, wait a minute. Something's not right. Something's off. We gotta re-examine this. So I think that if it wasn't for that type of pressure, they probably wouldn't have moved in the direction that they moved, to be totally honest, because we've been protesting for years. And incrementally, it takes about 15, 20, 30 some odd years for us to get a minor change, a very minor change in things in this society for black people to actually be acknowledged, right? I mean, think about it. George Floyd got hurt. All of a sudden, you start to see George Floyd colleges pop up. You start to see Black Lives Matter in DC. You started to see all of these different murals and stuff that people were painting. So it was a huge acknowledgement, but that acknowledgement really came off to the backs of the allyship. And I'm not putting the importance on allyship. Okay. I'm not doing that. I'm saying that because of that allyship and the foundation that this country was founded upon, which is white supremacy and racism.
Okay.
Because of that, when you start to get people like that involved in that process, then that's where I think the needle moved.
I mean, okay. All right. I feel like some of the attention of the protests and just the consistency of the protests, but I mean, no doubt having allies, powerful allies, okay, helps definitely. So
yeah, and let me clear something up, because I don't want anybody beating you up or beating me up. So what black people had accomplished at that time, I think was very well needed and should be celebrated. You know, our coming together under that heinous incident, his death was very much needed. And like I say, that should be celebrated, because we did stand up. You know, we came together. So yes, us quote unquote putting pressure on, our constituents and people that are in political office. I think, yes, that did have an impact, but at the same time, I still believe if it wasn't for that degree of allyship, that things probably would have been a lot different. Because look at how they painted George Floyd.
During the case? Yeah,
totally. Look at how they painted the man. And the sad part about it was that we caught you on camera for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, kneeling on a man that did not fight you. They didn't fight you at all. He cooperated. He took instructions. Right. He did every last bit of that. But you found it necessary to kneel on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. What was in his mind to do that for 8 minutes and 46 seconds?
Right. Like, I mean, how Chauvin's mother, that, and I mean, even like the girlfriend, or I don't know if she was an ex-girlfriend or his current girlfriend, how she sat there and said how they did drugs together. And it's just like they were totally trying to prepare some sort of narrative that he died from drugs and not from kneeling on his neck and all that. And even like during the case, there were interviews of the officers of Breonna Taylor. They would make reference to the George Floyd case, and they would say, I'm not sure if he died from the kneeling or if a drug over. So, and that was intentional all day long.
Yep.
Totally intentional.
That's
because
correct.
the case wasn't even started by then. But for him, I think it was Mattingly or whoever it was. I don't know if his book is out yet or what, but what he said was totally intentional. He made sure to put it out there that, a lot of white people think that he didn't die from the kneeling of the neck. He died from these drugs he was on, and they had that white lady sit up there and say they got pills from people, and it was like, what was the who why?
But let's explore that for a minute. I mean, okay, let's say he did drugs, because I don't know. Let's say he did drugs. Okay, you're still looking at a functioning man. He's walking on his two legs. He has all of his faculties. Big guy. He was a big guy. And he literally probably could have took out two of those police officers if he would have gotten angry. He could have took out a couple of them. Aside from the fact that they did have service revolvers, let's take the service of revolvers out of the equation, right? Let's take the mace out of the equation. Let's take the tasers out of the equation. Could he have possibly, if he would have gotten enraged, took out maybe two of them? Yeah. I see, because he was a big guy, right? So, and this is what I'm talking about. This is what I was talking about earlier, how the narrative has already been painted for us because of every negative thing. And there's negative things that go on throughout every community. Ours just happen to have more highlight reels than anybody else's.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So all the negative stuff that, some of us do in our community becomes the norm for everybody else. So it was the belief that he was already guilty because he took drugs. Okay, so let's say he took drugs. Did it warrant you putting you hit your knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? It didn't warrant that.
It didn't.
He already complied. He was on the ground. It was for you. It was 4 police officers. Chauvin was the ringleader, and he decided that he was going to take whatever action necessary that he thought he could take to get away with it. And this is the mind of a lot of police. Well, I've done this before, and I'll get away with it just like I got away with it before. This is why the police unions need to be held accountable.
They do. And, similarly, a lot of people feel like Breonna Taylor was involved with whatever illegal activity her prior ex-boyfriend was involved with. They had been watching her for weeks, ahead of the incident. And, I think she received an Amazon package for the guy or something. And, and a lot of people today feel like, she's to blame for, her own death. And it's just, I don't know, it's just really sad that's how, in spite of the excessiveness and how, I don't know if things did not go by the book in that raid, like protocol being followed, that they basically blame her. They feel like she was a criminal herself, like she was involved in drugs activity.
Some of these police officers are cowboys. Some of them want the action. They don't want to be out in the rural area where it's boring. Some of them want the action. So they legitimately come up with the idea, and they're given approval to go where the quote unquote action is because they're cowboys. They want to let off. They don't care. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So again, when you have multiple police officers in a raid, no, you don't know what's in the house necessarily. You don't know what's in the house. You don't know what to expect. But you have 15, 10, however many police officers that go into that space, right? You go into that space, you kick the doors open, or you use a battering ram or whatever, and you get inside the space. You're already making these huge commands to the people that you are investigating or whatever, doing the raid, whatever. And you have control of the situation. You have control of the situation. So again, to blame her for her own death is absolutely insane for doing that. It's not warranted. Same thing with Sandra Bland. Same thing with many others that have gone through that same process. It is absolutely ridiculous. And we're painted as monsters and boogeymen every time somebody, we have these type of encounters. We're the boogeyman. So, I mean, hell, I've been a pretty good citizen just about all my life, just like other Black people. But hell, let's be honest, when the police pulls up behind you, there's a degree of nervousness that you have because you don't know exactly what they're going to do.
Okay.
You don't know what's going to happen. There's a degree of nervousness, like, okay, well, and what's going to happen here? So I hope you understand what I'm saying, and I hope the listening audience understands what I'm trying to say. But the reality is that these incidents, these things that occur, it has to be really and thoroughly investigated, and those that do these type of things to the people that's supposed to be protecting and serving, they need to be held accountable, period.
Yes, definitely. I strayed away on that one, but it was just related, and I just
No, we're fine. I know. I ramble too, but yeah.
But no, that's a good point. Accountability is key in these cases. So, something when people, witness cases, I mean, people will, pull out their phone and get footage. And I think that's great because, it can save someone's life. It can bring justice to someone's life. So, I mean, yeah, that's key. That's definitely key. So we'll move on to another story. We will talk about this one here is about Henrietta Lacks. And Henrietta Lacks' family is suing a pharmaceutical company for using her cells without her permission. And so some of you guys may be familiar. There's a book written about this case, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I know Charlemagne makes reference to Henrietta Lacks a lot of times on The Breakfast Club. There was a movie that Oprah played, a family member of the Lacks family. And it's just a really interesting story that is true, actually. So Henrietta Lacks was an African-American woman who had cancer and in the 1950s. And during her treatment, they discovered that her cells sort of were unique and they developed and were just really rare. And so they, in discovering that her cells were so unique and developed in this way, and she went through her treatment, she died and such. They kept her cells, they used her cells for all of this medical research for years without her knowledge, her family's knowledge for years. And so it's come back up again because it came up around 2010 was when the book came out, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And in that story, it's about a journalist who basically finds out about it and she documents and she reaches out to the family and they go to Johns Hopkins and they do all this research. In the book and the movie is basically outlining the book where the journalist is interviewing the family and they do all of this research and they uncover how they did all this research. It's really incredible how they did all this secretly, which is totally ethically inappropriately and wrong. And that's one of the things in medicine that is really crucial is ethics, right? So they totally, went against that. And it's just really shocking and appalling that such a prestigious medical institution would do such a thing, or is it, to a Black woman, during that time. So anyway, your thoughts on this story?
It's totally criminal. It's totally criminal.
Yeah.
But experimentation on Black people has been going on for years.
Yeah.
Secretly, they have been doing these experimentations and under the guise of whatever they want to paint it as. And, we're left not knowing, you know what I mean? And I think in this instance, since they did have and do have legitimate information about what happened, what occurred, and the family is still living, I think the family should continue to pursue
Mm-hmm.
some type of justice for what these people did. But you got to keep in mind those experimentations that went on during that time frame and beyond that time frame. We're talking about, during slavery and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon for that to happen. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for experimentation to happen on Black women, even during the days and times that we live in now. It's just not uncommon, right? It's not uncommon for experimentations to happen to Black men. A lot of people know about the Tuskegee experiment, which was huge,
Yes.
which they still haven't done anything about that as of yet. I think one president actually apologized for that, but
Okay.
what's come up, what's come about as a result of the apology is the thing.
Mm.
You know, it's just I'll put it this way: a lot of us are just now finding out about a lot of this information, but again, experimentations on Black people have been going on for 4 years. And the fact that they withheld that information, the fact that they actually did exactly what they did, only let me know one thing: was that even during that time frame, let me know one thing is that we're still a commodity, so to speak, or we're still not inclusive in this society like we are told that we are. We're
Okay.
just not. And that kind of leads back into the conversation we were having earlier about the George Floyds and all of those that actually had been done an injustice by the police department and other institutions. And the fact that you can't find any kind of justice from the institutions that they have available to you. I mean, sometimes you got to go all the way to the higher court, which is actually ridiculous, because if I'm part of this social equality, if I'm part of this country, then I should be able to enjoy the rights and the freedoms just like everybody else, period.
Yes.
Right? I shouldn't have to be scrutinized and, demoralized and things of that nature. I shouldn't have to go through that. I should be given, the adequate, again, representation and laws and stuff like that everybody else enjoys for that freedom. And I shouldn't have anybody else from a different ethnicity to speak for me. And sometimes that actually happens. We go into a neighborhood, we belong to the neighborhood, but a police officer or somebody else will come into that neighborhood and probably may have seen you like 2 or 3 times and they know you're there. But sometimes something kicks in and they'll say, well, do you belong here? Why are you here? Well, I live here. No, show me you live here. And
Yeah,
then
even the neighbors do that in associations and things like, you see
yeah,
them.
it's crazy. It's crazy. And then somebody that has to be benevolent in that community that everybody respects and loves, which 9 times out of 10, and I'm gonna have to say it, 9 times out of 10, it's a white person. They come up and then they have to speak for you. That's the same thing they did in slavery. When you had to have somebody vouch for you. This is my property, or this is my slave. This is mine. Right. So somebody has to vouch for you. And I think that's still ridiculous in the day and time that we live in, that, most people, Black or people of color, so to speak, have to experience that. That is totally ridiculous. But hats off to the family. They're still pursuing justice for that occurred to the sister. And I hope and I pray that they win some type of justice in that case.
Definitely, definitely. I'll keep an eye on that story. But for you guys, listeners, look up that story and check out the book or the movie. It was a HBO movie, but it might be like out on Hulu. Or it's just really interesting. Her life really is interesting in that story. So the last story we'll talk about involves a really dynamic woman from my neck of the woods in St. Louis, Missouri, Cori Bush. She's a congresswoman here, and she decided to take a stance against a rule impacting individuals infected by COVID. A lot of people lost their jobs and were impacted, losing their homes and such. And so there was the eviction moratorium expiring. And so she actually slept outside of the DC Capitol to protest this expiration. She knew how many people would be impacted in facing evictions in their homes. And so she and many others slept out on the Capitol that weekend. Was it last weekend? And because it affected many of millions of tenants around the country would be impacted by this rule, or this law rather. And so based on her doing this, the Biden administration has extended the eviction moratorium. And so, how impactful was it for her to take this stance and make this movement? She's been in office for a little while now as a congresswoman from Missouri, and she's really doing things. Your thoughts on Cori Bush?
Yeah, I haven't been following a lot of that too much, but I did read this story.
Mm-hmm.
I think what she did was incredible. I think it actually took a lot of courage. But at the same time, I'm going to say that our institutions should not have its citizens to go through what they are going through. All of the things that are set into place to make money, because we live in a capitalistic society.
Yes.
All of the things that are put into place to make money. I get it. People want to live well, but not at the expense of the ignorance of people. And I'm not calling anybody per se, specifically ignorance. And what I mean by ignorance is that, we're not privy to a lot of information and things that go on behind the scenes where we can make an educated judgment on what we need for our own personal life. We shouldn't had to be put in this situation. And Cori Bush should not have had to be one that, went to that extreme to have a decision made by this administration to stay, the eviction. It's kind of ridiculous. You're running a country. You have millions of people that are facing eviction. Not only that, you have many veterans who are on the street.
Yes.
Right? They're on the street homeless, and they have served this country well. And for some reason, they can't get the adequate health care, housing, money. They can't get any of that for some reason. They've served this country well. So in my opinion, nobody needs to go to that extreme to that to happen. This institution, this government needs to do what's right by its citizens without having its citizens beg for the things that they need to function in their daily life. That is insane to me. Kudos to Cori Bush for doing that. She didn't necessarily have to do it, but she should not have been put in a position to do that is the biggest thing.
Right. Yeah, I hear you on that. I think she even shared that, she had been, homeless at one point. A lot of people had been homeless, whether, sleeping at a friend's house, or lost their home in some kind of capacity. And a lot of it's just really impacting people more now than ever with what's going on with the effects of the pandemic. So
yeah, there's just some people that are in leadership right now that are not making the best judgments. They're not making the best decisions for its citizens. And again, that weight falls on their shoulder, not on the citizens. Mm-hmm. Most of us, or many of us, are subject to, those that govern us. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, it's no different than having somebody in your home that claims to be a leader, and then the direction that they take you in is going to have you suffering. You know what I'm saying? No, you don't want to be subject to that. You don't want to do that. So the same thing with the leaders that are in our communities, that are also in our states, and right on up to the doorsteps of DC. You got to make better decisions, and you got to think about the people instead of the bottom line. The bottom line is not necessarily that important. You've already got multitudes of billionaires. You got a bunch of millionaires. There's an imbalance in this country, which is ridiculous. You got 1% of the country, 1% of the citizens holding 90 to 95% of the wealth, and everybody else is working. Mm-hmm. Right. So we're told that we're supposed to chase this golden carrot, and if we work hard enough, we'll be able to attain that. And I think that's just absolutely different. It's ridiculous. Come on, man.
Yeah,
That's an imbalance.
Totally spinning wheels.
An imbalance. Yeah, it's an imbalance. It's like, you know, all of these billionaires out here, and you holding all of this money, and you say, okay, well, they have to do that because they're the job creators. Okay, whatever. But if we, and I'll end with this, if we are in a Judeo-Christian society and you believe in helping your neighbors and you believe in the Christ that you talk about, there's no way in hell that you're going to see a man or a woman or a child for that matter and not find the best way to help them. You know what I'm saying? You don't necessarily have to give them a bunch of money, but make sure that they have adequate education. Make sure that they have adequate health care. Make sure they have all of that to make the best decision for their lives. And right now, there's a lot of people that's withholding that from the masses, where the masses can't get any of it. And that's going to be very problematic in the next 2 years.
Definitely. Yeah. Right. So that was our last story. I wanted to talk about your podcast. In closing, the All Things Black podcast. Tell us what your podcast is about and where we can find it.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We get to the good stuff now. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. I love that conversation. I love the questions that you ask, and I love the stories that you actually went over. That's a great format. I've never thought about doing anything like that on mine. But anyway, I just love being on the show and the spirit of exchange that we had. But yes, I run the All Things Black podcast. I'm new to the podcasting space. I've been podcasting since the beginning of the year.
Really?
But yeah. So I'm new to the space. I'm still learning a lot as we go. But like I said earlier in the broadcast, that I do have a degree in audio engineering and music technology. So I'm familiar with that space. So yes, I got the Rodecaster Pro. Yes, I got the Rode Pod mics. I got the software that, to be able to, really get down and dirty with the editing and recording. So I have all of that. But my podcast primarily is about telling Black stories and life experiences through the art of podcasting and visual media. So I'm really purposefully wanting to have, Black people come on the program and legitimately talk about their life experiences or their expertise in certain fields, because from my understanding, a lot of what is occurring in Black communities with people that are really, really making an impact, or those that are trying to make an impact, those stories don't get told a lot of times. So I want to be the avenue where they can come on and feel free in those spaces to talk about what they are doing or what they are trying to accomplish, or just a life story in general. So that's what my podcast is about. So we talk about anything from fatherhood to generational wealth creation and dynastic wealth creation. There's a beautiful sister that I interviewed named Latanya White, Professor Latanya White. She is absolutely incredible, and she's been studying dynastic wealth and creation, general wealth creation for a while now, and she really wants to educate Black people on the differences and what that is, because we know about generational wealth, but we don't necessarily know what dynastic wealth is, right? It blew my mind when I heard it. I was like, what? but yeah, so fatherhood, family, relationships, entrepreneurship, business, all that kind of stuff is what I talk about on the show.
Awesome. So people could reach out if they want to be a guest or something.
Yes. I have. If you go to my website, ATB Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, ATB Podcast, and there's also on my Instagram page, which is ATB Podcast underscore podcast, AT Black underscore podcast, I believe. So if you go there, you find out a little bit more information. There's also a link in my bio that will take you to another page where you can partake of some of the services and stuff there, which is, again, you know, if you want to be a guest on the show, you can schedule right in that link. If you want to, you know, have some kind of consulting going on, you can click on another link. You know, so you know, listen to the podcast. There's a link for that. So you'll be able to find me there, and also you can listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, iHeartRadio. So just about all the streaming platforms is where you can go and listen.
Okay. And then your course that's coming up, when is it being offered?
So I'm finalizing everything, but that course is mainly geared towards people that are in the podcast space that want to get a better sound quality for their recordings. Mm-hmm. So, many people are doing podcasts today, and I absolutely love that. And there's a lot of us that are getting to that into that space as well, which I absolutely love as well. But I think there's some fundamental things that people can know about to actually get a greater sounding quality of their podcast. Because it's one thing to listen to great content, but it's another thing to listen to great content with great audio. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So it makes a difference. It makes a total difference. But so that's what I'm here to help with, is to, give you some fundamentals that will help you improve the audio quality without spending a ton of money on getting gear. And that's a lot of times you don't have to spend a lot of money on getting all of this gear to make that happen. There's just some general things that you can do per se yourself to accomplish that.
Okay. So that's awesome. So I'll definitely post your links, and we definitely appreciate you joining us today. Anything else you want the people to know?
Just that, for the listeners that enjoy listening to podcasting, make sure that you intentionally listen to us as Black podcasters, right? We're trying our best to give you the best content that we can do. We can. And, we're working our behinds off. We might not be like the top tier podcasters or whatever, but, give us a shot, give us a listen, and, rate us. You know what I'm saying? The same way that you would rate another podcast that's in the vein of, celebrity podcasts or something like that, because we're quick to do that because we love those type of people. But if you hear like a Jen, what she's doing right now, Woke by Accident podcast, go to her podcast, man, and comment on it, share her links, that kind of stuff, and if she's open to donations, donate to her podcast. Donate to her, it will help everybody. So that's what I would say, make sure that you give us a listen, support us. That's the biggest thing.
All right. Well said. Well, thank you for that. No, for sure. It's all about supporting each other, and I agree. So yeah, we thank you again, and much continued success with everything you have going on. And that is a wrap. Thank you guys for listening.
At this time, we are going to go ahead and conclude this episode. We do appreciate you listening. We do invite you to follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. On Twitter, it is Woke by. The Gmail is wokebyaccident@gmail.com. And we are available on all of your favorite streaming platforms. Please go out and follow us, share, leave a review, tell a friend. And every time you listen, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you again, and take care.